Yeah, that's weird. Hi guys, really quick, just sound check. Is everybody getting a big echo in the background or?
I turned my audio off, so it should be okay.
Yeah, is that any better now or?
It's good now.
Okay, all right. So, hi, welcome everybody. I know this is our rescheduled meeting from not that long ago. So this is the 6:37. I'm going to call the meeting of the AdHoc Subcommittee to review the bylaws to order. Here in the room with me, also on camera, are Scott, Dr. Riley, myself. We are here at the Curriculum Center, so if anybody needs to find us, we are above on the top floor. And I just realized we are now broadcasting live, so nobody except this group just heard that. So Lauren said she might join us, so we'll be on the lookout for that too. We are at quorum right now. On the screen, if you guys can see it, I presented our agenda just to share. February 8th, Scott, Brett, and I met, and we have the minutes there. I'm going to switch over to share that in just a second. But at that meeting, we talked about a majority document that Scott was working on, and I believe we have it. And I'm going to confirm that with Scott in just a second. And then we're going to also look at a pros and cons strategizing session for our bylaws versus policy decision, and the recommendation that we can then bring forward to the school committee. We can discuss that. And then after that, we're going to just anticipate next steps, what we might expect when we share that with the full table. And then from there on, we'll schedule our next meetings or meeting. I know it's been a challenge to get everybody together. Everybody has different subcommittees they all sit on. So without further ado, give me a second here. I'm going to pull up the minutes from February 8th. One second here. Can everybody see that okay? All right.
Hey.
Hi. So,
I was like, was there a meeting?
That's what I did too. I was downstairs.
no, we're, so John and Brennan just joined us. Hi.
Hi. Mostly just here to listen.
Oh, okay. No worries. Yeah. So, you know, one thing I included in us approving these minutes, and just to take a look at them, I also wanted to give a quick synopsis of some things we talked about from the last meeting. I know that some of you weren't there, so just to kind of go over. So right in the bullet point below, reviewed feedback regarding draft bylaws, we looked at one of the last member feedbacks that we talked about at the previous meeting prior to this one. And we looked at that, and we also looked at looking at subcommittee quantity and looking at how, you know, the subcommittees we have right now can stay, albeit with fewer members as time goes on. Looking further at school committees that do not have bylaws and how governance processes occur, document maintenance for weighted voting, and then specifics related to recalculations, quorum, and things like that. That meeting, you know, for anybody who wasn't there, it is still on the live stream. I mean, sorry, on the YouTube. So it was just about a 28-minute meeting, and if anybody wants to go back, they can definitely catch it there. Going down forward a little bit. So Scott had a document that he's going to share with us tonight, and then we talked about basically discussing a bylaws versus policy document that we're going to bring forward to the next school committee meeting. So I will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of, let me just make sure I get the right date here, Wednesday, February 8, 2023, of the ad hoc subcommittee to review the bylaws.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so I have Brett who moved it and Scott who seconded. Once again, I can give you guys another quick minute to read the minutes over, review it.
I looked them over already.
Yeah. Does it need any more time, or you guys think you're all set? Yeah. All right, so with that, we can go to a roll call vote. So starting here in the room, because we are hybrid, we will go member by member. So Member Runster?
Yes.
All right. Member Beardmore?
Beardmore, yes.
And then Member Shapiro?
Shapiro abstain.
Okay. And so chair votes yes. With that, the motion to approve the minutes passes. Give me 1 second, guys. I'm just going to switch over my screen one more time. Just 1 second. Just want to make sure. So, Scott, I'm going to bring up what I believe to be the document that you did upload.
Yes.
Um,
I got some hard copies too.
Okay.
It's the same thing, I'm sure.
Yeah, perfect. No, good. So I'm going to,
Packet.
yeah, and actually, Scott, I'm going to go on mute here for a second.
Sure.
I don't know if you want to take over to talk about the document.
Okay.
So,
You sure?
yep, I'm going to bring it up on the screen.
I have to turn my speaker back on.
Yeah, I'm going to turn.
Interesting to see what happens. We good? One more try. Can people hear me? Okay. So I'm assuming you can hear me. So I think one thing that we hadn't gotten to was just there'd been some concerns about how we define majority and how weighted voted would work. And there's certain things in the current bylaws. For instance, we defined a quorum as a majority of the committee. An action of the committee requires a majority vote in most cases, and sometimes it's a 3/4 majority. So it occurred to me that all we probably needed to do in order to fix many of those questions that are coming up is define what a majority means in the current agreement. So my proposal essentially, I don't know if I can scroll down here.
No, sure. Yeah.
Yes. So in the red is what's in the current bylaws. So the proposed changes was basically just adding a new section. I just marked it section X. We can decide where to put it, but it basically just defines what a majority means for the purpose of this agreement. So, the majority of the committee or any subcommittee, and we can change subcommittee if we decide that we don't want to do subcommittees, shall be determined by the proportional weighted votes of individual committee members. Each member's vote shall be weighted in proportion to the population of the member town compared to the population of all member towns as defined in the regional agreement. So I think if we just define majority, then everywhere else in the bylaws where we use that term, we're covered. And I had proposed a small change to section 4 as well, where it just says action of the committee shall require a majority of the proportional weighted votes of individual committee members unless otherwise specified. That's what the only addition there is the proportional weighted part. And then I had added a sentence that just said all roll call votes should be recorded by the secretary in a spreadsheet to calculate the total vote and the results announced to the committee. My idea was that we'd actually save those. So if there was any question about how the votes came out, if someone's like, well, that was 8-7, why did it fail or whatever, we could actually have the spreadsheet available that people could look at and decide that that really was the correct proportional vote. So it's pretty small, the changes, but that was my suggestion.
Scott, if you want to mute.
Sure.
So, in order, I think I saw Deidre and then Sherry.
Oh,
go
Sherry
ahead,
first,
Deidre.
then Sherry first, then me.
Okay, Sherry, go ahead.
For the last part about announcing to the committee, I think that I understand that if it's close, but on these votes where it's 15-1, it would be obvious. I wouldn't want to put in our bylaws that we have to announce every vote. It would be time consuming, and I don't think necessary. I get it if they're close, but
Yeah.
I mean, I think, well, when I talked to Barry about it, we had talked about having the votes presented on a screen, like where we have our virtual screen right now, and having one of those be the Excel spreadsheet that Randy's going to be using to copy them anyway. So it would be shown. But I just wouldn't want to say that we're going to do something that if we, for some reason, can't do in a meeting, if we're in Rutland or something, and we can't put it on the screen, or I don't know. I just want to be careful.
Yeah, maybe we could just leave it as it will be recorded, so that if anybody wants to, if there's any question, either at that point or in the future, if someone brings it up, we have the recording of the vote.
Yeah. Actually, real quick, just want to do another sound check. Could everybody hear Scott when he said that? Okay, good. Yeah, that's a good point, Scott. No, Sherry, that's good to know. But actually, go ahead, Deidre.
Deidre, you're muted.
Sorry. I'm still now. How about now? Yeah. Okay. So I'm still confused about the weighted majority, and I'm just wondering if I read this and I'm confused, are people like when we present this to the group, we're going to have to come up with an example. So is it that the way that I understand it, if I'm understanding it, and I'm not sure, is that in a committee situation like this, so let's just say in a committee situation like this, if your vote is like 1.5, then if somebody's missing who's not 1.5, then you're actually counted like as a person and a half. So you actually could have, it's not physical people sitting there for the majority. It's the weight of that person. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think so. That's the way I understand it.
Okay.
And that's right. If there is a close call or a tiebreaker, that's why we were saying
Well,
we don't want a whole
yeah, no.
chair.
Yeah.
Go
I'm
ahead.
thinking more of like quorum. I'm sorry.
Oh,
When it
for
comes to quorum. Yeah. So like we have to wait for that 1.5 person to show up before we can start, because technically until that 1.5 is here, it doesn't count. I think that's what I meant. I'm sorry. The weighted in voting, I understand. It's the quorum that I'm still a little confused about.
Yeah, I can let Sherry answer, but we did talk about that the
Yeah.
weighted voting I don't think counts when it comes to quorum. It's straight head count. But
Okay. All
I'll
right.
let the
So
rest of the group chime in. That's just what I remember from our discussions.
I thought that section X was to kind of cover quorum as well. I can't hear Scott now.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I thought that quorum was based on the weighted vote as well. If that's not true, that's fine. I don't have a problem either way, but I thought it was. The way I've been thinking about it, the easiest way I've found to think about it is just that we have weighted voting now, but everyone has a weight of 1. So we're just adjusting that 1 just a little bit either way. But otherwise, there's nothing really different.
I thought in some old meetings you guys looked it up and most that had weighted voting didn't use it for quorum, or am I remembering that wrong?
It's ringing about the shirt. Do you remember, or does Sherry remember the quorum question?
Yeah, Sherry's got her hand up, so.
So actually, yeah. So we'll go to Sherry next. Again.
When I called around, it really is based on the regional agreement, though. So some did and some didn't. In our case, it says that we will use weighted voting for everything.
Including quorum.
For quorum as well?
For everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, Sherry, too, the biggest concern or what people talked about most there was what would that mean for like subcommittee assignments and things of that nature, right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the goal really is to be as close to one as possible, though. So hopefully it's not going to affect too many things. I mean, right now we don't. I mean, after I brought it up in the full meeting, I thought about it some more, and right now our committees, our subcommittees aren't appropriately weighted by town either,
Right.
right? And we make decisions based on the best interest of the kids and not on the best interest of our town. And I would hope that moving forward, we do the same thing. And if it means your vote is 1.15 versus somebody else's 0.9, I hope that we're making those same good decisions.
Okay, no, it's good. It's good to know. Brett, go ahead.
I just think we need to document it so it's clear. So if we're confused, it really needs to be written down and documented in the bylaws, because there's going to be confusion and we're going to forget. So it's just my 2 cents.
No, definitely. Go ahead, Dieter.
Yeah, so I mean, I like what Scott's saying as far as like, let's define a majority, but then I think there also needs to be a statement somewhere that says a quorum is majority based on section X. You know what I mean? As defined in section X or something like that. Like, I think now quorum needs to be defined because people might look at quorum differently as a majority when with this weighted thing. So if a majority is weighted, then quorum is also weighted. Like, I think it needs to be spelled out a little bit. Yeah. If that's the direction we want to go.
No,
It makes sense. I think my original idea was that we could not worry about finding every place if we just define majority, but my original intent actually was to go through and find every place that's
every
mentioned.
place. Yeah.
And to just put, like they said, weighted majority instead of majority.
Right.
Right. That's
so
a
we
good
could
way.
certainly do that. It's not too many places.
No.
I went through and read.
I think
Yeah.
that people start splitting hairs when you start talking quorum because it could be interpreted differently. Yeah.
I think based on some of the discussions we've had in the past year, it's better to just be very clear so it's not open for interpretation, like during a meeting when there could be some question raised.
Right. No, so just to clarify on that, Scott, too. So when we're saying let's find everywhere we see the word majority, we're talking about like within specifically the bylaw document.
The bylaws,
Yeah,
yes. Yeah. It's really not that many places. I started doing it and then I just pared it back to that one paragraph because I thought we could just handle it.
Yeah.
And we could do the other thing pretty easily.
Yeah. So that's a good point. All right. So yeah, it's funny. Even after I read the document, Scott, it made sense to me. But then I realized in every year when we get new candidates, new election season, it's almost like it's easier to give an orientation on weighted voting or give some kind of preamble to that. Preamble before many of the subsequent meetings come up. For all the ongoing subcommittee chairs, that's another thing too. I want to make sure that they understand enough. I mean, like Sherry said, it shouldn't be like a major confusion, but since it will be all new, I think that's a great point. Yeah. So I think that's good with this document. Going forward, then, this can be one of the things we embed and make sure that we have, it would be like, so, okay, I guess this kind of leads into our next thing, which is right now, as it stands, would this be, Scott, like an amendment to a bylaw? Or like an edit, I guess?
Yes, so I've written this as just basically an addition. I was suggesting an addition to, we were actually
Addendum.
An
addendum,
at that point. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So, all right, that's which the reason I bring it up, and Deidre, I'll get to you right in a second. The reason I bring it up is then it comes to our next our next item on the agenda, which is to discuss whether the bylaw versus policy, pros and cons item. But before we get to that, Deidre, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just looking at your last sentence there, Scott, and it says all roll call votes. It sounds like all votes shall be roll call. You know what I mean? There's not a different kind of vote. It's like all votes are roll call. So, Scott, can't hear you.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So I don't think the weighted voting insists on having roll call votes all the time. You know, if there's a voice vote and it's unanimous or almost unanimous, you don't have
Okay.
to roll call, and then the weighted vote won't matter. The chair always has discretion to take a voice vote and make a ruling that it passed, and then people can object to that if they think that was not correct. I don't think anything in the new,
Yeah.
I don't think anything with
Okay.
weighted voting changes that.
Okay. All right. I just was imagining, but you're saying that there could be an opportunity where it's just a not a roll call vote, and that doesn't necessarily need to be recorded.
Correct. The same as it would be now.
Okay.
Right. So real quick to that, actually, Scott, to get to that too, would an example of that be like a straw poll vote?
A straw poll, but if you think, if we were all in this room right now, we could have a vote where we just say all in favor, right? And everyone raises their hands or says aye or whatever. And in that case, the chair can make a ruling whether the motion passes or not. If someone objects then and says, I want a roll call vote, then they can call for a roll call vote. That's the current way that Robert's Rules of Order and our meetings work.
Yeah.
Now, that often isn't the case because we have people on the phone. So whenever you
Yeah.
have someone on the phone, you have to do a roll call.
You do, right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So that's okay. That's fine. You can leave it as long as that distinction is understood.
Yeah. Sorry, Sherry, I thought I saw your hand.
Nope, Scott covered it.
Okay. All right. So for right now, I know my instinct tells me we'll go ahead and prep this for an addendum. And that would be a whole, requiring if I'm not mistaken, requiring a majority vote, and then it would be an addendum to the bylaws if we're going that route, right? To add.
Well, I think it's an open question because I know we had a lot of feedback last time, and I'm not sure I think we have to decide what direction we're going to go in.
Perfect.
Because we now have two sets of bylaws: our original bylaws and the amended bylaws that were sent out to everybody.
Right.
Back in December. So we'd have to decide which of those to add it to. And I think as a subcommittee, we need to decide the direction that we want to go in. So
Absolutely.
I don't want to speak for everybody yet.
No. So with that, unless anybody has any other questions on this, we're going to move right along to that next part of the agenda. Is everybody all set so far right now? All right. So moving along to, and for this, I'm actually, Dr. Riley, if you want to jump on, what we're going to do is I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and what I'm trying to figure what are the best ways to do this, but I think we'll have Dr. Riley maybe just start opening up a document. We'll maybe have this kind of like being a brainstorming session. So let me stop presenting.
Do you want me to share that document, or you want me just to keep it?
So which document is that?
Did you want me just to start a fresh Google Doc?
Yeah, it's just a fresh Google Doc. Yeah. So now comes where let me figure out the best way to kind of introduce this, right? If you are a governing body, or if you are any entity, one of the initial reasons you'd have bylaws is to kind of explain what are some of the core parts of your governing structure that are going to be the same. You're going to have 3 people on your board. Every board member gets a simple vote. Things like of that nature. They're nice and core and concrete in a lot of ways for a lot of, whether you're running a PTO or Girl Scout troop or a condo board. When you go from that to then putting in policies, in one hand, your governing structure is very corely related to your bylaws. But on the other hand, if you just have policies, there's a little bit more flexibility in them. If you ask the legal world, they're going to give you different versions of the pros and cons and what those all come with. And I think for us, just to start the discussion, we could make a list of pros and cons to keeping bylaws or not having bylaws. Now, so just to be clear, if we're going to say we're not going to have bylaws, then our way of doing things has to solely rely on policies. Is that everybody's understanding? Yeah. So I think it's, this is where when Dr. Riley gets ready, we can open up the floor for the different thoughts on that. I know based on the feedback we received, it was a question that came up. It came up multiple times actually, and I think it's definitely worth taking a closer look at. With what we're going to come up with here tonight, even if we come up with other things along the way to the next meeting, it would be something good to present, like a comprehensive 360-degree side to the whole thing, to the full table.
Yep.
Then we can get what their thoughts are. So that was kind of what I had in mind for this section of the meeting. So I don't know if anybody wants to start. All right.
Brett has his hand up first.
So we'll go Brett, and then we'll go Scott.
If we don't have bylaws, what drives the policies? It's the chicken and the egg. I don't recall if we were talking about that. Maybe work was talking about it. That's just one off the top of the head.
Mm-hmm.
Does the bylaws drive and tell us to create the policies?
Yeah. Actually, hold that thought for just a second. Actually, Dr. Riley, is there any way for you to share your screen? Yeah, I'm just going to get Dr. Riley to share your screen just so we can all see it on document. Brett, that's a great point. That was one of the things on top of my head. But no, go ahead, Scott. Yeah.
Generally speaking, bylaws are harder to amend than policies. Now, that's not the case. Like, a lot of times bylaws take a 2/3 majority to amend. You want them to be sort of your constitution, things that don't change unless you're like really sure about changing them. Now, our bylaws say a simple majority can amend the bylaws, so that's not actually true.
Right.
On the other hand, I feel like policies, not that they're just suggestions, but we have a lot of policies that we don't follow to the letter. Like we have a policy that limits the number of students per class that we go over all the time because we can't get there. I have always thought of bylaws as like you must do, and the policies as like, yes, these are the things that we're striving for, these are the things that we're trying to do, but not quite as enforceable. I don't know if there's any legal, distinction between the two things, but in my mind, that's sort of the way that I think about it.
Yeah.
So in terms of this discussion, I would definitely be amenable to paring back the bylaws to just what we think are the most important things about how the committee runs, and then moving a lot of other stuff to policies that we think are, just less core to the way that the committee runs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Deidre, go ahead. And actually, Deidre, you might be on mute again.
We can't hear you, Deidre.
You wouldn't. Oh, forget it. I'm so sorry. I'm being conscious about putting my hand down, and I need to get conscious about doing both. Okay. No, Brett, I'm kind of thinking the same way that you're saying too, but I do see that the exercise for the committee, for us to come up with like the pros and cons on both sides, is really important because they asked us, you know what I mean? So, but this also kind of requires us to define for the committee, for us, and then for the committee, the difference between a bylaw and a policy, because it sounds like that it's not really defined. So one of the things, like you just said, Scott, is like, my understanding is that bylaws are supposed to be harder to amend, but the way that we do policy amendments, it's harder to amend, like to change a policy. It has to be read in committee twice. Is there a policy that tells us that we have to do that? Or is that a bylaw that tells us to do that? I don't think it's a bylaw, right? That we read policies twice.
I think that's a policy, but I could.
Yeah, no, and Deidre, you bring up a great point.
Like, this is where I'm saying it's harder to change a policy than the way that we have it right now. It's harder to change a policy than the bylaws. Now, that might not be what we decide we want to do. If we want to make bylaws harder to change and that they are the core, you know what I mean? But like, that's the way it is right now, I think. Unless Sherry, it's kind of a question, more of a statement. And that's
actually, no, definitely. And Sherry, go ahead.
The main difference is with the bylaws right now, we have to give notice before we make changes, and with policies, we don't.
But we do, we read them twice in committee, right?
Right, but
That's
but you have to, I don't have it in front of me, I'm sorry. Well, maybe
Yep.
one of you do.
14
but-
days for bylaws.
Yeah, so it has to be 14 days notice ahead of time before you even vote the first time to change a bylaw.
14 days notice to change a bylaw, and policies just have to go on to agenda.
They don't even have to go on the agenda, quite honestly. They can be brought directly to the committee.
Oh, okay. But they have to be read.
Twice.
I feel like the
Yeah.
reading the twice thing makes it a 2-month thing already. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because you read it once and then you have to wait till the next meeting, which is like sometimes a month later. That's where I'm kind of coming from with that. But, you know, I'm just from what I've observed.
No, Deidre, that's a good point. So for the committee, I want to throw this out there, right? So the 2 reading thing, you know, maybe we can dig into and find out where we have that put into place. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think that's a Robert Rules style like requirement. I think we must have written it down somewhere.
There's a policy.
There's a policy, right? So you're not wrong, Deidre, and I'll play devil's advocate for a second, right? So the way our meeting structures go right now, and this isn't to insinuate that we need to change that structure, but in a world where if you wanted to get around the 2 meetings taken over the span of 2 months, you would then follow a different policy to then call what would seem like an emergency meeting and then push the second reading to get done that way. And let's say feasibly you might get that done in a week. On Monday, you have 1 reading on, by the end of the week before you post the second meeting, you have another one. And there you go, the policy is done. I'm not saying that needs to be like precedent that we're setting, but you're absolutely right. Like right now as it stands, just logistically, that seems to be what happens. But that was just something that was crossed my mind. But go ahead, Brett.
I just, a couple things on policies. Policies can be outdated and there can be gaps in policies. I just saw that not always follow to the letter, and it just gave me a brainstorm.
No, that's a great point.
Outdated and gaps.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we have a policy that says we have to review all policies every 2 years, and I don't think we haven't followed that policy.
Right.
But yeah.
Right. No, go ahead, Sherry.
We also don't follow our bylaws to the letter.
Right.
No, you're right.
No, and you guys bring up a great point. That was running through my head too. I mean, if I was running a condo board, and you know, it's a whole. I know it's not like, you know, apples to apples here, but that's something that maybe going forward could be a bit, you know, a light of focus can be shined on somehow in relation to that. In our current state with, I think member Lavoie brought it up the other night, other members have brought it up multiple times. We do have some policies that have, you know, not taken readings or looked at for over 10, 15 years. I think there might be 1 or 2 that might even go well beyond that. So if we were to get to a point where in the years to come, let's say the 2-year review period was being followed, that could be a big onus that we could shift to going forward. I just don't know. In our current state, you know, I would question whether we would be in that position with the number of policies that we have, and then also the review of the bylaws every couple of years. But it's just my 2 cents on that. So far, any other thoughts too you guys wanted to add, or Deidre?
Yeah, so do you think it would be helpful if we came up with a definition of a policy and then it came up with a definition of a bylaw? I'm thinking a policy is specific to a thing. You know what I mean? It's like specific to a situation. At least that's what I've seen. Where bylaws, I really like how you said, Kamara, is kind of our governing structure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I could see numerous policies that are governing structures. Do you know what I mean? But that just sounds like disjointed. You know what I mean? So does that sound right? I'm just trying to think of a definition of a bylaws is like the school committee. Yeah, like the school committee governing structure. How we operate, operations.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
Yeah. Actually, go ahead, Scott. Yeah.
I was just going to say, believe it or not, we have a policy that defines what a policy is.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Actually,
Policies provide the parameters within which the district functions and create the governance structure for school district decisions.
the governing, so a policy does do governing structure. That
That's what it
does
says.
sound redundant then.
Policies provide the parameters within which the district functions and create the governance structure for school district decisions.
What policy number is that?
P1500.
Yeah, so maybe
Definition of policy.
Dr. Riley, you could just put it right there.
Mm-hmm.
So is that more about,
Oh, what is it? P1, sorry.
P1500.
is that more about the policies are supposed to guide our decisions and how we govern versus the actual, like, details of the operations of making those decisions? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think, and it does say within which the district functions, which may be, there may be something there that the bylaws are supposed to be how the committee functions and the
Right.
policies are how the
District functions, right?
I don't know. I'm sort of making this up as I go.
No.
But
So
the 1,000 policies are school committee operations.
Okay.
That's what they are.
Yep,
And
you're
in
right.
my mind, that's the same thing where our bylaws would fit in. School committee operations.
And several people have pointed out that there are a lot of school committees that don't have bylaws.
Don't have
and
bylaws.
Everything is just in that,
right.
So
the 1,000
does anyone,
policies.
so this would be kind of a question. I don't know if anyone that's been here for a while, but like, does anyone know why we have the 1,000s if we have bylaws? Like, what was the thinking around duplicating that effort? I don't know. If anyone's been here that long.
No, I mean, I don't think any of us have been here that long. But there's a lot more in the policies than are in the bylaws. So it talks about collective bargaining, how, resignations, ethics.
Mm-hmm.
But that's more like we were saying, like suggestions on how to do things, not requirements. Again, are we not following those? Yeah,
No, it's a
But
great
they
point.
should be requirements, though.
Yeah,
They're
I mean,
supposed
I
to
think
be
we're supposed to
requirements.
follow them all. It's just, I think people, I don't know if there's anybody that knows every word of every one of these policies because there's like
There's a ton.
500 of them.
Right. Actually, really quick, before I forget, Brett, I noticed in chat you threw a couple things down, and I just wanted to see if I can pull them up real quick here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Brett, did you want to speak to him real quick, or?
I just did a simple Google search on what a bylaw versus a policy. And so a policy is a course or principle of action adopted or proposed by a party or individual, whereas a bylaw is a rule made by a company or society to control the actions of its members. So, food for thought.
Yeah.
Control the actions of the members. I think
Right.
that's pretty key.
So I'm gonna chime in at this point. I was mulling this over in my head whether I want to bring it up or not, but before we follow anything down the legal rabbit hole here, I think back sometimes to bylaws, right? And I think back about, is there like a linchpin of liability that a bylaw would help protect an entity or group from? Bylaws, because by their inherent definition, they tend to be a bit more structured, a bit more concrete. I see, and I couldn't, I don't have a lot of legal background, but that's where I couldn't connect. If somebody was going to come after you for something, a decision that was made by the district, right, or the school committee by way of the district, what would be easier to defend in a legal problem, a bylaw or a policy? And I feel like that might be well out of our scope, but that's one of those things that I think makes part of this discussion a little bit more challenging. I I don't know what legal, what Attorney Bartulos has ever said about it, but yeah, I was just, so Sherry, go ahead.
Well, I'm not a lawyer either, but I have had multiple talks with Joe about similar things, and he basically says that, follow your bylaws or follow your policies or follow the law, and you choose follow the law, and he said, the worst that's going to happen to you if you don't follow your bylaws or your policies is you get a slap on your wrist from your own committee. He said, of course, you want to follow both of them, but it's not always possible, right? Anyway, there are multiple circumstances where that could happen, right? But in his mind, or my interpretation of what he's telling us is, as long as we're following the law, we're okay. And that neither the policies nor the bylaws are something that's going to allow us to, or be held against us, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. So basically, to what I mentioned too, I think that's a good point that he brings up. It's not every day that we're facing down like lawsuits or legal challenges. I mean, we are a school committee, and so, I don't know, Dr. Riley, I don't know if you have any insight on,
On this, the only thing I say I was thinking about as you were having this discussion is that we have so many policies. And so you wonder if you're truly establishing the governing structure of the school committee, does it have an increased level of import, or is it easier to refer to if it's not, and I don't mean this in a negative way, just part of this mass of policies that we have elsewhere? I mean, that's just the thing I'm thinking of. That if this is truly going to guide the behavior of the school committee and how things are done, is it perhaps better not associated with that mass? But I don't know that. It's just a thought.
Right.
And I don't, this is all foreign to me too. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah. Sorry, Brett, go ahead.
I just think what Dr. Riley said was important, and I think you should put it down on the sheet there, that the policy, that if we don't have the bylaws, it could get lost in the policies. The bylaws could get lost. That's all.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, actually. And he is the one typing on the document, so we're gonna have him put that down there. So I had Deidre and then Sherry. And actually, Deidre, sorry, I think you're on mute
Muted
again.
again.
Did it again. Scott's hands. I was trying to say Scott's hands.
Oh,
Up for
sorry.
a minute. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Are you all set?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, to that point of it getting lost, I'm also thinking for the ease, also the ease of the new person coming in. It's kind of like, when I started 3 years ago, I was kind of like, what exactly am I supposed to do? And they were like, read the bylaws. Like nobody said to me, read all 100 policies, 1,000 policies that we have. You know what I mean? They said, read the bylaws. So, I mean, that could be another like reason to have the bylaws is, to Dr. Riley's point, how we operate could get lost in policy, where someone could just really look at the bylaws and get a good, clear picture of how we operate. So it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. All right, go ahead, Sherry.
Okay, but to play devil's advocate, just having policy and having everything in one place so that it's easy to see that nothing is conflicting, having one place to look for all the information is helpful sometimes too.
Okay, so real quick, actually, Brad, I'll get right to you in a second. Okay, I don't disagree with that. So I want to throw something out there for you guys. If you look under the Series 1000 policies, right, I'm not going to try to add more work to our committee, but one of the things I was thinking was, and to Dietrich's point too, would there be a more presentable way, a better presented way, that if you were hypothetically a new committee member, taking some of those policies and creating something to the akin of like an orientation guide or a very like targeted kind of guide that gets the same core things you would want any school committee member to get across, but especially even further reinforced if you were new. That was just something I was thinking about. I mean, Series 1000 under the school committee policies. I mean, there's a lot of meat in there. Like, not gonna, and so that's just a thought I had. But sorry, Brett, go ahead. Or I forget who had their stand up.
It was me, but I think I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. But that was something too that we can think about. Sherry.
I forget if it was here in management that we talked about having a new committee, like an orientation guide, and actually having an orientation process for new committee members. But I think that's separate from what this is.
Yeah.
I wouldn't make it bylaws versus policies because of new member orientation. I think we should just have a different new member orientation plan.
Yeah. So, yeah, looking at the different, points we've all made here, it is a lot to kind of dissect and try to present cohesively, at least. Actually, sorry, so I have John's hand here in the room, but go ahead, John. Yeah.
Does MASC have a recommendation, or do they say go either way? Like when we were at the conference, I don't think there was one on policies versus bylaws. And so I'm wondering, do they have a thought on, because they know different districts do it differently, like have they ever come up with anything like that?
So my understanding from Lauren, who did the research on this, is that there's very few places that even have bylaws. That like the most common thing is just to have policies, and that's it.
So seems like they're able to function okay then, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So was it just we're afraid of it being different? Because
No, I mean that's why
That's right. No, it's
that's why we're discussing. Could we get, because several members had suggested that.
Right.
Do away with the bylaws and just move everything into policies. I think if we did that, we'd have to look at the bylaws and move a lot of it into policy. So, but we could certainly do that. That could be the recommendation.
Yeah.
Yes, but that was my understanding. It's uncommon to have bylaws.
Right.
There aren't that many school committees that have them.
Yeah. So, forgot somebody had their hand up, but you guys can easily raise it up again. But okay, so if we recommend, so hypothetically, I'm just throwing this out there, if we recommend to go to policies, right? My instinct tells me what would be I call it a happy bridge that would check off logistical and possibly, any future legal things that might come up. And I think to Scott's point, it would be not to, yes, on paper, you're getting rid of your bylaws, in theory, hypothetically, but then you're taking the same information and you're putting it into new policies. I would even take it one step further. Once we have those things in policies or new ones, or allocate and amend them wherever they need to go, then a future step might be to make those Series 1000 policies a lot more, not so abundant, but more concise and more, straightforward. So hypothetically, if we were to get rid of bylaws, that would be something I could easily see as a good feasible option. Take whatever's in there and find a new home for it in a new policy, or amend it to a policy that's already on the books. So that's just one option I could think of, but I'm definitely open to hearing any ways you guys can see. to look at that. Yeah. And Deidre, go ahead.
I felt like it was safer just to raise my physical hand than actually trying to raise. So my only thing about that though would be like if that's the way that this committee wants to propose and the larger committee agrees, we have to come up with some sort of way to make this happen fast. Do you know what I mean? Like we started this ad hoc back in what, September to rewrite the bylaws, and now we're trying to like backtrack and say, well, maybe we don't need to rewrite the bylaws. You know what I mean? I feel like the 6 months is like, I'm a little. So if we bring it to committee that we're going to rewrite the policies, then we need to have some sort of commitment that we'll waive the second readings or something like that. Like some ways that it's not going to go like month to month to month looking at each one of these policies that we have in the 1000 series there.
Right.
So thoughts around how we would kind of push that to make it happen faster, because my understanding is that there's a little bit of a time crunch here, and I don't know, Sherry, if you can talk more about this, but like we're gonna lose a bunch of people, come this next election, which is only 2 months away, and then we can't meet for a little while, and then when we come back, we're gonna have brand new people. So I feel like there's like not a lot of time to work right now.
Okay, which part do you want me to address first?
Any of your thoughts, Sherry?
Okay, so the whole point of reviewing the bylaws, which is truly the task, right? Reviewing. There's nothing saying we had to do anything with them. We could have said they're good to go, right? But the whole point was to make sure that we can act as a committee with fewer members. That was the goal. I think that when we're moving from 22 to 19, I don't think there's going to be any issue, quite honestly, with the exception of clarifying the weighted voting part. So from an actual time crunch standpoint, I think that as long as it's clear how we're moving forward come May/June, then I think we're covered. There's nothing saying this ad hoc can't continue on. The only thing that we do have to make sure is that moving forward, if we are switching over to a policy-based system, that we approve all these policies and then remove the bylaws so that we keep it in place. It would be great if we could do it all in, 2 special meetings where we just go through policy this, policy that, and just knock them all out. Because we are going to lose some people, but we're not losing a significant number of people this year, I don't think. Or I guess there's a possibility depending on how the elections go. I don't know. I don't have a big problem with it taking some time. Because I don't think we can get it done in a month. And that's
I don't think so either. So I guess that's just what I'm saying, is that like there'd have to be some sort of commitment, like you're saying, a couple of special meetings that are just focused on that. Maybe the summer would be a good time where we actually don't have a lot of other business really going on. Maybe would be a good time to target that time for that. But I mean, I guess that's just kind of like my other concern about, oh my gosh, policy is going to take forever for it to actually happen. I do like your point though, that you're right. We don't get rid of, to keep in mind not to vote out the bylaws and say we don't need these anymore and throw them away and not have policies in place. We need to have, for a while they'll be both. And there might need to be, I mean, like Sherry, would you think that there would have to be like a temporary policy that says which one trumps the other? Because they're going to contradict each other for a while if we have both. Like, how would you handle that?
If we did it right, we could amend the bylaws at the same time where, I don't know. That's pushing it. I don't know.
Like, I'm imagining what I can see what you're saying, amending at the same time. That could get messy, but I'm also like imagining like a policy the first policy would be making a policy that policies like trump bylaws. You know what I mean? And then moving forward with changes.
That's,
I don't,
yeah.
I don't know that we have anything that, yeah, I don't think there's anything right now that contradicts anything. I'm just not sure.
No, definitely. And Brett.
Just hearing the discussions, I lean more and more to keeping the bylaws. And maybe we make the recommendation that we take next year to further evaluate how to blend them into policies. I think the bylaws are good. I think that I just leaning towards keeping the bylaws and keeping the work that we've done so far, and maybe the next step would be to do something like that.
All right.
And maybe that's the straw poll to the full committee, or maybe this just has to be a staged thing where it's many processes where we've revamped the bylaws. Next year, take it blended into the policies, if the full committee really wants that.
Yeah. So I want to add one thing to that, Brett. At some point, gosh, this is probably many meetings ago, but let me ask you guys all this to help conjure up my memory on this. When we looked first at the bylaws, I think at some points we kind of looked at them and we said, gosh, some of this looks like it could be its own policy, right? It just made me wonder, if we did keep the bylaws, is that just something, would that be a starting point to just say, hey, this whole section on what you're doing with meeting agendas, why don't we just put it in its own policy? But then at the same time, would it just be easier to do that all at once or do it piecewise? And I don't know if there's a perfect approach, but I remember it came up at one of the early meetings, like, wow, some of this goes into extraordinary detail, like for being bylaw, where you could easily make the argument it could have been policy too. Sorry, go ahead, Brett.
No, I just even Deirdre saying, let's define the bylaws. I think that we probably should have done that in September, but I think that the bylaws do have too much in them, and we could keep them to just a page, 2 pages, and the definition of the bylaws that we come to agree on or align on.
Yeah, it sounds good. I'm sorry. So one part of that Brett might have cut out. Did you say like keep it to a couple pages?
Yeah. I still like you're saying, it's like, is this really bylaw or is this really policy? And that might be a future agenda.
Yeah.
Topic.
No, definitely. I'll go ahead, Deidre.
Yeah. So maybe the incremental is kind of like what Brett's saying, is that if we focus on getting the bylaws to where they have to be right now, not worry about, like, we did talk about taking things out and all this stuff, but then like do that incrementally with the understanding of section by section, moving things to policy, section by section, you know what I mean? And then one, it won't be so daunting of a task, and two, we can really take the time that it needs with the committee to go through each part and make sure they're okay with the moves and the changes, and stuff like that. That might be the way to do it. But I think focusing right now on getting the bylaws where they have to be with the changes that we have to do, which is the weighted voting, which seems to be the only thing that's required, that might be where we focus.
And then once we filter everything through to policy, there'll be no bylaws left, and we'll be like, okay.
Right. Eventually, it'll be no page. It'll be it'll be an empty page. But I think that helps the contradictory thing that I'm kind of afraid of. Although, to Sherry's point, we'd have to look and see if there is any. But what I'm saying is, if we actually are going section by section, policy to policy, A to B, then we don't have to worry about contradicting ourselves anywhere.
That's a good point. And I actually, so real quick, so Sherry, right before you, I had Scott in the room, and then I'll get to you, Sherry. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I like what Deirdre said. I think, you know, we can do a very small amount right now to make sure everything is valid, and then just take it piece by piece if we think pieces need to be taken out. You know, I think what was scaring people was like it was a full replacement, and I think there were a lot of people going like, well, what changed? I'm not even sure what's different here. Like, is something different that I'm going to care about like 2 years from now that I don't even know about right now? So I think doing just the minimum now and then taking it piece by piece makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. No, Sherry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm good with making that, weighted voting change for now. And then I don't know if maybe you guys wait until May or June when we get into the new committee, and then we start having discussion. And I think I said this at the first bylaws meeting or second, that I think that this document can't come to the committee in one big new document, because there is no way that there's not going to be an amendment to the amendment to the amendment.
Right.
Everyone's going to want to change something. I really think that it needs to be even if it's not it could be voted on all at one time, but it at least needs to be presented in pieces, so that, we're talking about, how the chair is decided or whatever, and we want to change something on that, then it comes to the committee and it has a discussion. And we don't have to vote on anything, but it can be in the subcommittee report
Yep.
that we're going to discuss this part tonight, and we take 10 minutes and see what everybody's questions or concerns are, and then you guys finalize that piece, and then it comes to the committee, the whole new committee, once it's all finalized, and then everybody's had their input heard by the full public too.
I like that. I like that because it also avoids like a 3-hour discussion where we can just like take it 10 minutes at a time where we talk about this part.
Right.
Yeah.
Helps people stay focused too on exactly what you're looking at.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Deirdre.
Yeah, the other thing too is I would recommend that we send like ahead of time, so it would come through the secretary, so that everyone gets it, but like as part of the documentation before the meeting, this is the part that we are looking at right now, this is the change that we're proposing, like that kind of an idea, so that they can see them side by side. The only thing that's hard about that is that we'd have to be a little strategic about it, but because we found that the bylaws actually like had the same information in different sections. Do you know what I mean? So we'd have to like make sure that if we cross something out, we were crossing it out and making the explanation, because this is in the different section already, we'll discuss this later or something like that, so people don't see things being lost. Because that was that's how it became overwhelming, I think, for us to try to rewrite, because we were like, oh, this is so redundant, we already said that thing in the other section and stuff like that. So I think like a before and after, before and after, is sent to people before the meeting, so they can really see the part that we're talking about.
So again, yes, I'm on the same page as what Deirdre is saying, and I think we wanted to reorganize it, and I think that's valuable. But maybe we go through section by section and agree on everything first, leave it the way it is, and then at the end we can just say we're reorganizing. There's 0 changes functionally to this,
right?
Like we're just making it more readable, and that can be like the last thing. But once everyone's reviewed every section, there might be just a lot more trust that that's the case.
Oh, so that's a good point. So, yeah, Brett, go ahead.
Do we need a special meeting to devote, not full 2 or 3 hours, but do we need a special meeting to really devote to this, the full committee? Like, are we getting to that point?
It's a good question. I mean, even if you were to, one thing I feel like that's predicated on is, right, let's say, I'm just going to use an arbitrary section. Let's take Article 3. It's probably the most mundane of the bylaws. But hypothetically, if we took it, right, and we proposed some amendment to it, and I'm not looking at Article 3 right now, but I'm just using it as a dummy example. If we did take it, and then it raised a lot of eyebrows, it could easily go from being a 20-minute conversation and Teasley being a long conversation. So to your point about, do we need a special meeting? I do wonder, is that subjective to what is the change at hand? So I don't know. That's a fair question. You know, I think we
I
could
just
totally
think
have a special meeting and be
just
done in
gives us
45
the
minutes. Yeah.
opportunity to really focus and maybe make some decisions at the full committee and dive a little deeper. I mean, this is a big deal,
Yeah.
and the full committee is not taking it lightly, and we shouldn't.
No.
That's all.
No, it's a good point. Go ahead, Deidre, and then Sherry.
Yeah, so I mean, so Brad, I can see what you're saying. It's just that 22 opinions in the room are going to get 22 people in the room are going to get 22 opinions. And I think that's the point of the subcommittee, is that we're really diving into it. We're making decision and we're making a proposal. And I think it kind of comes down to, do you like what we're proposing or not? Yay, nay. You know what I mean? It's not like, well, let's change that word over here and da da da. Like that's what we're kind of spending the time in doing, you know?
But how do we
So-
convey that trust?
And I
'Cause
think it's
can
the
tell you they
section
don't trust
thing.
us.
Yeah, exactly. I 100% agree. And that's what I'm saying. And notice I'm even using like little tiny, like little section. Like I'm saying a paragraph. I'm not saying Article 3. I'm saying a paragraph, you know what I mean, at a time. And that's where it's going to take. And I think that's where Sherry's saying we're going to take 10 minutes. We're going to look at this paragraph. And then if it goes beyond 10 minutes, it goes back to committee. Like, I don't know. As Sherry has her hand up, I don't know if that's what, you know.
Right. Now go ahead, Sherry. Yeah.
Well, to Deidre's point there, I mean, I do think that it's a 10-minute discussion. It's input. You're asking for input. You're not asking for approval. And so that's where I got the 10-minute, input part from. To Brett, your question, I'm questioning for a special meeting. Are you thinking something prior to new committee or after new committee?
I was thinking prior. I'm like, I just don't know how we're gonna get this done. Like, I think maybe tonight or the next night we need to be like, what's our goal between now and May, and how are we gonna get there? Because Deirdre, I think you're right. We're running out of time.
Well, as of right now, I mean, we have a meeting. Excuse me, Kamara, may I?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
So yeah, Sherry,
as-
prior to the new regime.
Okay, so as of right now, we have a meeting on April 3rd. We have a meeting on April 27th. And then the next meeting, theoretically, assuming that all town elections happen as scheduled, the next meeting would be our reorganization meeting. So if you're talking about having a special meeting, that puts 3 meetings in April, and we have April vacation to deal with.
Yeah.
So I got to tell you, it's unlikely. Especially because you need 14 days notice to change the bylaws. So I'm just thinking logistically it might be difficult. If you all can figure it out, I'll back you up.
I appreciate that. It's just it just hammers that point that I just said, that we really need to figure out what we're walking away with and by when. And
No, right. That's you guys have good points. Actually, Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, so just repeating what I said, but I think we start small. What we're going to do this year is a very small thing. Make sure we've accounted for the weighted voting. I had one suggestion today. We could do whatever else, but let's get that passed by
100%.
And then I just counted, there's 27 individual sections in the bylaws. So let's take 2 per month and we'll go over all of them next year. And then we'll hopefully have an agreement at the end of the year on whatever the new bylaws are going to be. That would be sort of my proposal, which means that this
I agree.
goes into next year and we're not done until the end of next year. But maybe that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's a.
Well, you could be better prepared because you'd be living under a reduced committee and you'd have a better understanding of some of the issues that you may not have expected you're going to do. I've been here for, I think, all your meetings, and the one thing I'd say is I wouldn't want the committee to confuse the lack of perhaps a tangible work product with a lack of actual discussion and work. I think you could all articulate all the things you have considered, and that's why you're at a certain landing point right now. You've considered almost everything.
Yep.
And ultimately, sometimes it's stripping back and saying, no, this is what we'd recommend now. And then, we feel like this is the most thoughtful approach with this moving forward. So I wouldn't
Yeah.
I wouldn't devalue anything that you've done
Yeah.
because I think there's been a lot. I think there's ideas, but potentially where you would go. You know, whether it's continually review the bylaws, perhaps put them into policy. Like you have all kinds of different ideas, and I think there's value in that.
Mhm.
And it will you personally. I think you probably will end up in a better place taking that approach.
Mhm.
You know, or certainly more certain in what your final decisions are.
And I don't think we've seen anything that we're horrified by. Like things are working okay the way they are. I don't think there's anything that's come up that we need to change that right now. So, I'm okay with that approach, making it more incremental.
No, so yeah, this has been a really healthy, lively discussion here. We have the work document we made, at least with the pros and cons list. So my question to you guys would be this. All right, so to kind of itemize it in some way, shape, or form here, if we needed 14 days to amend the bylaw right now to reflect weighted voting, taking a little bit of Scott, what you had there with that document, we could shore it up, and then we can get it ready to recommend the change to the bylaw. We could start there, and then Sherry, to your point about the two meetings, I'm going to ask you guys this. So right now, today is April 21st. March 21st. Sherry, for that April 3rd meeting, how's our agenda looking right now? Would we have some space you could leave as a placeholder to kind of present a quick synopsis of what we kind of discussed here to the full committee, let them know that, maybe this is our long-term goal here over the next several months. And we took their feedback about policy versus, bylaw, and this is the roadmap we see to getting there. I don't know if that's an idea.
I think that it will be a pretty full agenda, but I think that has to be part of your subcommittee report. I think it just has to happen.
Okay. Yeah. And so go ahead, Brett.
Are we ready to just make that the first motion of this is the weighted voting and this is what we're going to amend to the bylaws? I mean, how are we 90% with the weighted voting? How comfortable are we?
I think the only thing, I'm just thinking back to what we were just talking about was clarifying quorum. But that could be a separate piece. We've got the weighted voting piece from what Scott wrote, right?
I think you guys I don't think there's 14 days before the
Next meeting.
before the meeting.
Oh, that's a good point.
And I think,
Okay.
I haven't made a suggestion, but we should put it into the document. One of us should put it in the document, and we should actually review it as the final language as a subcommittee, I think.
Where it is.
Yes.
Yeah. So, all that just got answered in the same couple sentences. That's wonderful. Good. So, to Scott's point, yep, we will actually add it to the bylaw document. So, one goal I see here is to get that accomplished, and the 14-day allowance that we need. I highly recommend at least one more meeting before the 27th. Does that seem fair? Yeah. And if you guys feel too,
Yeah.
I'm open to that
So
too.
would you-
Before April 27th, because
14
I think
days before the April
Yeah,
3rd.
we need a meeting 14 days before the super school committee meeting that we want to vote on this. So that's April 27th.
that's right.
Give us 3 weeks just to,
Yeah.
to get whatever we need to get to people.
Yeah. So no, that's a good point. So let me just see if I can pull up a calendar real quick here.
And there's a vacation weekend that matters.
Right. So the week of the 16th is vacation week in April, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if we wanted to aim for the 27th.
That's a Thursday meeting. Is that? Oh, that's May. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, actually April 27th is in fact, is in fact a Thursday meeting.
Nope.
Right?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
April 20. What am I looking at?
You
My
might be looking
calendar
at
is
March.
funky. Yes.
March
Yeah,
is-
Thursday meeting. Okay. Thursday, April 27th. Gotcha.
So, my recommendation is, I know, okay. So moving through the agenda here, I know we plan to anticipate next steps. I think we kind of covered that in what we discussed, but now coming into next meeting scheduling, the week of March 26th, so i.e. next week, or that first week in April, would that seem accurate to you guys to hit those deadlines? So the goal being is once we get the verbiage shored up, added to it, we can make the recommendation, take a vote on it, and then bring it to the full committee for a vote. But this all being in preparation for the April 27th meeting. Does that kind of seem like the right roadmap, at least for that right now?
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
How does the notification for the 14 days to the committee, is there just a notice to the committee? Is there anything else formal that needs to happen? Does anybody know that?
Yeah.
Let's go to the language.
Let's go to the language. So that's a great point. I mean, if this is something, I can't imagine it's something we need to notify the towns about,
No.
but
So
yeah.
the bylaws may be amended by a vote of the majority of the committee at any regular or special meeting, provided that the text of such amendment has been given to each member at least 14 days in advance.
Okay.
So I think Randy just needs to send it out by the 13th.
Right.
You want to give yourself some wiggle
Yeah,
room in
yeah,
case
we want-
anybody
yeah.
has-
That's the
Yeah.
spirit that's the spirit I was saying.
Randy needs whatever we're gonna give her by the 11th or whatever, so
Yeah.
she can send it out on the 12th, so there's no.
Hey, Scott, can you talk a little louder?
Sorry.
Yeah,
I was
sorry.
just gonna say, I think we need to give Randy the final, whatever we're gonna give on the 11th of April, so she can send it out on the 12th, so no one's saying it's 13
really.
days and 3 hours and wasn't 14 days, or whatever.
Yeah.
So that means that we need to meet, really the first week in April would really be the
Ideal.
ideal. It
Yeah.
gives us some time if we,
No, it's a good point.
Just a heads up, I don't know if anyone in your subcommittee is or not, it is Passover that
Oh.
week on Wednesday. So, but if it doesn't affect your subcommittee, that doesn't
That's
affect
good.
your
That's a good point.
subcommittee.
Wednesday the 5th,
Wednesday the 5th. So some
Yeah.
people might have the night before on the 4th
right,
As a-
sure.
and then the night of the 5th. But if it doesn't affect your subcommittee, then it doesn't matter. I just,
Yeah. No. Sherry, go ahead.
Just from a timing of the actual meeting standpoint, I'm pretty sure that the meeting on the 27th is there specifically. I mean, it's a regular meeting, so whatever is, anything can be discussed. But I think the intention of having that meeting is specifically for the evaluation of the superintendent, because it needs to be approved. Well, historically, it needs to be approved before the committee reorg meeting. So there won't be a ton of time to have an extended discussion. So I think that if you guys are prepared to take feedback, like just give an idea of the changes that are coming, even if it's to say we're simply looking at changing weighted voting, we will have final language for you in the next few days. Does anyone want to give any input, or just so that once it comes to the actual meeting on the 27th, it's not like an hour, because we won't have an hour to give you.
So Sherry, that's a really good point. So you're saying at that April 3rd meeting, be prepared to give that, and then by the 27th meeting, is that kind of like the logic?
Yeah, to give them an idea, get them thinking, and let them give you any feedback so that you are prepared for a yes vote on the 27th without a lot of discussion.
Okay.
So do we want to try and meet next week then?
I was actually just about to, I know this is shorter notice, but for those of us here, if anybody had an idea what next week looks like.
You can get a different district representative than myself. I'm at Paxton we have Paxton on Monday.
So it'll be in Paxton on Monday too.
Gotcha. Give me 1 second here, guys. Here.
Yeah, I'm good with next week. Nope, come on, just.
Do we have negotiations scheduled next week?
We do. Again, I can get somebody else to come to this. There's a budget presentation for the town of Princeton on Tuesday, the 28th. We have negotiations from 4 to 6 currently scheduled on the 29th. And I'm not available. I have a meeting for capital improvement presentation for Paxton on the 30th. But, and I'll be honest with you, we're good on that. And I can always ask Jane or whoever else to attend. So
I hate to say this, but I'll already be out here on the 29th if you want to.
I think that's,
Negotiations
yeah.
until 6:30, so
Yeah, so you're saying the 29th around 6:30?
it'd have to be at least 6:30.
Oh, so right, because you guys have.
So we could probably meet in the library.
Do whatever you want.
Yeah.
I'll be, Lauren and I will already be there, so.
Right. So,
I'm hopeful that if it's just this weighted voting thing and that's it, maybe it doesn't have to be a super long meeting.
No,
We can
no.
just look at the language, take
Yep.
any feedback, make amendments to it on the spot.
yeah, I think that works. Question then, so how's everybody else's availability for the 29th?
Good for me.
Yeah, I can do
Okay.
it. Yeah, that would be fine. Can we do online hybrid again?
Yeah, so one thing briefly I'll mention about that is my understanding, and anybody correct me if I'm wrong. Right now, the online hybrid expiration is technically March 31st.
Is it really?
I believe it is. I'm going to fact check that with MGL statutes and government right now. If there was a proposition to extend it, it is sitting in committee in state legislature right now. There's been talk about maybe going through 2025.
Sorry.
Oh, no. I think the Mass Municipal Association, various leaders support or have thoughts on it, but it is in committee. But at least what I want to double check is if we do hybrid, I believe we'll keep the link open. March 31st might be the cutoff. So if we get this meeting in before then, we can figure that out. Going forward after that, it'll all be out of our hands and we'll have to see how it goes. So yeah, so we can schedule for next meeting. We'll say for March 29th at
6:30.
6:30. Yeah, that sounds good.
Sometimes you go a little over, but
Yeah.
people get really grouchy if those meetings go past 6:30 because they're
Right, because you guys have
fairly
been right.
intense.
Because we're grouchy.
Yeah. So,
You get past 6:50 and I'm not paying attention.
Yeah. No. So with that, if there was anything tonight that we missed that you guys wanted to add, please go ahead and email me. But with that, I think at this point, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Kumar, do you want to make the changes? Do you want me to do so? I'm fine with you just doing it. If you'd like
Right.
me to do it, I could probably get something together for the 29th to actually incorporate it into the bylaws, whatever you think.
No, it's a good point. Do you guys, real quick, do you guys have any thoughts on that or?
I wasn't following. Didn't make sense.
Oh, so I had a proposal for the weighted voting. We had some suggestions today, which I can take, but someone needs to actually incorporate it into the bylaws. So I was just asking Kamara if he wanted to do it or he'd like me to do it.
Yeah. Scott, actually, since you already have the draft, if you want to take that on, that'd be great. I can definitely review it. Do you guys have anybody
Yeah,
else
that's
want
fine.
to?
Yeah, that's
right.
fine. Because I think Scott knows where it goes too.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, Scott. It
Mhm.
seemed like you had the nice cutouts properly when I saw the document. Yeah.
So I'll edit it into the current bylaws and I'll send that to you.
Yep. And then we can have, at one point, I think we saw the yellow highlighted, and then, we'll do a frame by frame to show, And in this case, it'll be easy. We're only going into one section probably, right? Yeah, it's perfect. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, sounds good. So we will go to a roll call vote. Here in the room, Scott.
Yes.
All right, and then Brett.
Yes.
All right, Deidre.
Yes.
All right, so with that, guys, we are just outside 8:00. Thank you, and we'll see. We'll have Randy send out the invitations for March 29th.
Okay. Good
Great
meeting, everyone.
All right,
Yeah,
thank you,
great
guys.
meeting.
Nice.
Thanks, everyone. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.